More Americans own homes today compared to a decade ago, but the same cannot be said for Black and Hispanic Americans in California. That's why the San Diego Housing Commission launched their first-time home buyer pilot program for Black people, indigenous people, and other people of color today.
The goal is to increase access to home ownership for every San Diegan. CBS 8's Kirsten Holmes takes a closer look at the barriers to home ownership and how this new program could help.
Let's start by taking a look at the numbers. Black and Latino homeownership rates are the lowest among California ethnic groups. The Black homeownership rate was about 50% in 2004, and that was at its peak. Latino homeownership was about 56%. And since then, homeownership rates for both groups have dropped significantly behind all other ethnic and racial groups. But why?
These are systemic racial issues that we have to tackle in this country.
Al Abdullah is the president and CEO of the Urban League of San Diego. He says for all families, the dream of home ownership is more out of reach as San Diego's housing market prices continue to rise.
I believe the median price of a home exceeds $800,000, which is one of the highest prices in the country. Rising interest rates, a lack of inventory, lack of pipeline. So you have all these converging factors that make it nearly impossible for the average family to own a home.
But for Black and Hispanic families?
You know, you could have an 800 credit score and still be denied a loan. The data does not lie. This is not anecdotal, this is empirical data. If we were able to have a society in which everybody had equity, this would not be an issue, but that has not been the case here.
Let's take a look at the data. According to the California Association of Realtors, housing affordability for all Californians deteriorates as home prices set record highs and interest rates surge. About 1 in 5 of all Californians earned enough to purchase an $800,000 home. By ethnic groups, 1/4 of white Californians can afford a home at this price, and 31% of Asians can afford a median-priced home. But only about 1 in 10 Black, Hispanic, or Latino households could afford the same home price.
You could do all the right things, but if you're paying $3,000, $4,000 per month for rent, how are you going to save money for down payment assistance?
Al says the lack of home ownership reverberates across families and communities for decades.
You fall farther and farther behind in terms of generational wealth because, you know, home ownership is the easiest way to build generational wealth.
A recent home buyer?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Is this your first house?
Yeah, it sure is.
Sesh Booker just bought his first home after going to the Urban League for help.
The hard part was just those initial costs to get my foot in the door in California. They sent me an intake form, I fill it out, and it was just very simple from there. Get your approval from the designated banks, your pre-approvals. Once you know how much you have, then you could go do the fun part, which is shopping, right?
Sesh says having resources like the Urban League's first-time homebuyer program made the near impossible possible.
You know, I was able to secure a $40,000 grant from the Urban Leagues, and then First Citizen Bank partnered with them and gave an additional $30K that went towards closing costs, mortgage rate buy downs, things of that nature. So it was really awesome.
Lupe Flores with the Chicano Federation says for Hispanic potential homeowners, despite rising home ownership rates, Latinos are also still less likely to own a home.
Our communities aren't necessarily able to be as competitive as families that have the means. We've seen a lot of folks either moving to neighboring counties that aren't as densely populated or even neighboring states.
The new program launched by the San Diego Housing Commission is specifically tailored for households of color, and it bridges the gap for middle-income families with higher earning thresholds of $175,200 for a family of 4 in San Diego. San Diego City Council President Pro Tem Monica Montgomery Stepp says the new BIPOC-specific approach will help.
So we have to do the best that we possibly can to ensure that our families have that type of down payment assistance that they need, because they may be making good money in order to pay a mortgage, but they may not have enough to save the larger amounts that are needed when we're talking about actually buying a home.
The Urban League of San Diego, the Chicano Federation, and the San Diego Housing Commission all have programs to help bridge the gap in home ownership. Lupe says the process sounds intimidating, but the risk of trying is worth the reward.
If you're not asking, it's always going to be a no. If you're not applying, it's always going to be a no.
Kirsten Holmes, CBS 8.